If you're just joining my series on narration, then I suggest you first look at part one titled The Telling of Your Story before starting this one because it will make this video easier to follow. We're now at part two in our narration series titled The Written Power of Narration. Where I left off in the previous video, I talked about that with good narration, your reader not only has the facts, but a little more insight into the lives of your characters. At this point, your reader is engaged. Through narration, your reader can relate to your characters on a familiar level because they are not just words on a page, they are becoming real for them. Through effective narration, you have a great deal of control over the flow of your novel. You may, for example, decide to set up the look of a bus station with a line of people waiting to board a bus. Here's how that might look on a page in your novel. A large clock outside of the ticket office just struck 7:35. The morning downtown bus was ready to depart. Several of the people in line were oblivious to the sudden appearance of rain clouds forming in the sky. They were either reading their morning paper or watching something on their cell phone, the usual escape from their mundane morning bus ride into the city. Here, you may choose to limit what you share with your readers. As you can imagine, there can be pages upon pages of descriptive narration devoted to a weekday morning bus station. Or, through narration, you can do it justice in a single paragraph. Likewise, the look of a basic room with a single character on a chair might seem to need no more than a single paragraph for narration, but you, as the writer, must be able to explore parts of that scene otherwise missed. Remember, your reader can't see your characters on that chair. You have to describe it for them. Here's how that might look on a page in your novel. Although he sat in what appeared to be a most comfortable high-back armchair, his eyes revealed a discomfort far greater than first imagined. Quite alone in that room, scarcely larger than necessary for a 10 by 10 area rug, he couldn't shed the feeling that someone was in there with him. With beads of sweat forming along both of his brows, the constant movement of his eyes was evident as he tried to pan the room and detect the entity. He was sure there was one locked in there with him. For a moment, his attention was held by the relentless ticking of the desktop clock left to him by his recently departed father. Tick tock, each strike reverberated through his mind, seemingly amplified to the point where he needed to cover his ears to drown out some of the sound. When his eyes fell on the portrait of his father beside the wild boar he had shot and killed, it appeared as if his father was staring directly at him. His eyes seemed to follow him as he tried to avoid direct contact by focusing on the boar. It was the sound of a book dropping to the floor that broke him free of his trance and spinning around in his chair to see who was behind him. The fear in his eyes was far more apparent now, as the redness from days without proper sleep easily detected in both eyes wide and quivering. Reaching down for the book, he felt a chill brush over him. A glance over at the only window in the room showed it had remained closed. Not even the full-length curtains, tied neatly to either side of the full-height windows, had been disturbed. The huge chandelier, too large for such a small room, began to sway under its own weight as he stood and stared at it, its many lights flickering on and off. As you can imagine, regardless of whether you're depicting a simple room or a person's state of mind, with good narration, several pages can be devoted to bringing it to life for your reader. At times, offering your reader more than a picture is able. Because, let's face it, A picture might be worth 1,000 words, but not even a picture can show what's happening inside your character's mind. When a novel is narrated well, it might be described as a beautifully written tale artistically depicting the essence of that which the author intended to convey. This is because the author of such a novel tells his story through narration. Whenever we read about a dark and stormy night where a child is left to wander about, or when we read the climax of a story where the woman, after escaping the clutches of her assailant, leaps to safety at the same moment he is killed by an oncoming bus, or when a seemingly distraught man sits on the edge of a bed with a gun, through narration, we understand that the author is able to let us know there is a great deal more going on than the obvious. We are getting the opportunity to experience a story that the author has created. Whether it's in the first, second, or third person point of view, whatever viewpoint it's delivered from, it stems from the perspective of the author by way of his unique style of narration. In my earlier video on theme, in the example of the scene at the park, if you haven't realized it yet, the way the scene is described with the woman talking on the bench, their daughters next to them playing house, the boy and his dog running about causing havoc, this is the narration. Time for another of my little tales. Once there was a very wealthy woman named Esme who loved to flaunt her wealth on her friends, especially those that were struggling financially. She took great pleasure in showing off for the purpose of belittling them. She also loved to gamble and would routinely wager large amounts of money on even the most trivial of bets. And that was because no matter what she bet for or who she bet with, she never, ever lost. There wasn't a bet that she would turn down, and there wasn't a time that she didn't win. Everyone who knew her, and even those that had merely heard about her, knew that it was a fool's game to bet with her. For her 50th birthday, she decided to throw the biggest and most elaborate party anyone had ever attended. It didn't matter to her. She could afford it. Besides, she had won a bet of some kind or another with almost everyone in attendance. So it were the winnings she got from them that helped pay for the party anyway. One of her invited guests, by the name of Theodore, was an old school friend of hers. Since they were teens, Esme had beaten him continually at every bet that they had together, and he couldn't understand how she was always able to beat him. Over the years, he even bet her on things she hadn't a clue of and he was an expert on, and still she won. Now, at her party, Esme made it a point to embarrass her old schoolmate by challenging him to yet another bet in front of the 200 guests in attendance. Theodore had vowed never to bet with her ever again, but Esme was smart and knew that in front of so many people, he wouldn't be able to decline it. "What shall we bet on?" asked Theodore. "But I must tell you that I have nothing of value left to wager." Esme looked at him and smiled. "That is not true," she said. "You have that beautiful ring on your finger." Theodore looked down at the ring on his finger and gasped. "Esme, you know very well that this ring is a gift from my long departed great grandmother. It's priceless. It is the only thing of value I have left in this world." Esme continued to smile at him while the other guests watched intently. "Didn't you once used to brag about being the greatest thief in the city?" she asked. That was a long time ago, he replied. I no longer have the talent or the desire to steal. But surely, if you were as good as you claimed, certainly you haven't lost all of your talent. Theodore stared at Esme with a look of uneasiness. I'll even make it worth your while, she continued. What are you proposing? He asked. Do you see this necklace that I'm wearing? Everyone in the room stared at the necklace. It was exquisite. It is one of the most valuable necklaces ever created. It's called Heaven's Kiss. I won it in a bet several years ago, and I only wear it on very special occasions. I bet you everything I own, including Heaven's Kiss, if you can find a way to steal it from me no later than this coming Friday at the stroke of midnight. But if you lose, you'll give me your granny's ring. She then began laughing as everyone in the room waited for his response. Theodore stood staring at Esme for a long moment while all eyes were on him. With that amount of attention focused on him, he couldn't refuse. Very well then, he said. By this coming Friday, at the stroke of midnight, I will have possession of your necklace. That night, after the party was over, Esme went to her safe and placed the necklace inside. Then, with a smile, she went to sleep. The next day, she got up and, after having breakfast, thought about Theodore and wondered when he would make his first attempt at stealing her necklace. But when night came and she hadn't seen any sign of him, she began to wonder. She knew how much his great-grandmother's ring meant to him, and she knew he would go to great lengths not to lose it. That's when she believed he was up to something. She then took the necklace out of the bedroom safe and brought it down to the large, impenetrable safe in her basement. After another night had passed, and still no sign of Theodore, she began to think. She began thinking that the rumors of him being the greatest thief in the city might indeed be true. So, the next morning, she hired a special security force to stand guard around her safe. But after another night had passed and still no sign of Theodore, she hired a team of highly paid mercenaries to patrol the grounds around her house. But after another night had passed and still no sign of Theodore, she became extremely concerned and took the necklace out of her safe and decided to wear it. She figured that no matter how good of a thief he might be, if he somehow managed to make it past the mercenaries, and then the team of security guards posted outside her bedroom door, he would never be able to get the necklace from around her neck without her knowing it. Then, on the following Friday, at just minutes before the stroke of midnight, Theodore arrived. He was escorted to the sitting room where Esme sat surrounded by armed guards. It looks like I have beaten you once again, she laughed. Theodore looked around at the many men and the two women that had spent the last couple of nights in the same bed as Esme and began smiling. I'm sorry to inform you, Esme, but this time I'm the obvious winner. Today, I'll talk about the power that good narration holds for your story. Then I'll let you know how Theodore finally beat his old schoolmate. When we think of a story, any story, we think about it in two very distinct ways: reading it or having it read to us. Let's examine being read to first. Can you remember back when you were a child and just couldn't wait for someone to read you a bedtime story? There's probably not a child living that wouldn't love to lie back in their bed and listen intently to someone reading a story to them. Think about it. They get into the bed, pull the covers up so they're nice and cozy, and wait for the moment for the story to begin. It's such a desired time for children because it is the time when they can really let their imagination go unbounded. It could be a simple story about how a little rabbit lost the keys to its house and had to travel through the forest in search of where it might have dropped them. Eventually, it finds them and makes it back home just as the sun is setting and in time for dinner. Like I said, a simple story, but for a child, it's not just a story about a rabbit hopping about trying to find its house keys. It's an amazing adventure that the rabbit goes on through the forest that takes the child along with it. To that child, they are right there with that rabbit every step of the way, their imaginations working overtime as they try to visualize the forest and where those keys could be. This made possible by the power of good narration. With good narration, a child drifts off into another world and lives there for a time, enjoying the journey they are accompanying the story along. That's why they fall asleep. They're already in a dream world, and when you stop reading and sneak out of the room so you don't wake them, they are still on that journey following the rabbit while it hops its way through the forest. It's the narration that provides this journey. It's the narration that takes them out of their bed and into that make believe forest. And it's narration that keeps them there even after they've fallen asleep. Who doesn't like to hear a good story? As an adult, our minds might not live half the time in our own little imagined world like a child's, but adults still like to imagine places other than the places they come in contact with on a regular basis. It's human nature. Sure, we might not get into bed and wait anxiously for someone to read us a bedtime story, but we do enjoy getting into bed, pulling up the covers so we're nice and cozy, and getting back to the novel we have waited all day to continue reading. It's the other way we think of a story. As adults, we love to read. We love to find a gripping tale and sit down and immerse ourselves in it. We enjoy allowing our thoughts to take us away from our usual existence and send us on a journey that brings us a level of joy only our imagination can offer. We may not be waiting for someone to read to us, but the result is the same. We are catapulted into a world partly of our own making. I say partly because this world is made available to us with the help of the narration that guides us along the way. Without the narration, children wouldn't be able to imagine a character like a rabbit in search of its keys to its house any more than an adult being able to imagine what it would be like for the young woman who has recently received her long awaited inheritance while she tries to discover of the two young men she is madly in love with, which would give his life for her and which would sooner take hers. Through the power of narration, whether you're reading or being read to, with the ability of being able to not only tell a good story, but take your reader along with you, it is a power that is the difference between a good novel and one your reader will want to read or hear again and again. And now, the ending to the story I call Planning Ahead. It turns out Theodore really was a great thief, but he had given all of that up years before. He also knew his old schoolmate very well and knew she couldn't pass up the opportunity to embarrass him in front of all her guests. He also knew that she had always desired his great-grandmother's ring and wouldn't stop until she had it. She had periodically tried to bet him for it since they were teenagers, but he wasn't stupid enough to risk it to someone who always wins her bets. Until that night, when Esme wagered that he couldn't steal her necklace, it was all he could do not to smile. The truth is, he had been patiently waiting for her to make such a wager back when he made a career of stealing. And that's when he had first stolen her necklace and replaced it with a very exact fake. So when Theodore accepted the wager, he simply waited patiently at his home until he was ready to show up with the real necklace. Esme simply believed that he had somehow fooled all of her security and stolen it from around her neck when actually he had it safely hidden in a drawer in his house for the past 7 years. In my next video, I'll begin my series on dialogue and its importance to the success of your novel, titled Confusing Dialogue with the Narration. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.